Hello, I am Dr. Lawson. I am organizing our Level 1 international field work in Peru for this summer. And so I wanted to sort of have a video to try and recruit students who are interested and sort of start becoming organized for this incredible opportunity. So just a general trip outline or agenda. Again, these dates are tentative, but when planning, it's nice to have an idea, or it's nice to have some dates in the book, so to speak, so we can have an idea of what we could be doing or what it could look like. And so please know these dates are not set in stone yet. Don't be planning your weddings or your lives around these dates. They may shift a little bit. It's going to depend on airfare prices. Certainly, if we could bump our trip back a day or forward a day, and it saves us $100 or so, we're going to go with the cheaper flight options. But typically, what our itinerary looks like is typically we arrive really late in Lima, Peru in an evening. We'll have transportation that will take us to our retreat home or retreat house where we'll stay. We'll all have our own rooms, our own bathrooms within those rooms. It's sort of down a long corridor. And then there's a nice sort of meeting room where we can debrief for the day and those sorts of things. So we'll be staying there. Kemmerly, the person we like to contract with, who has all of these wonderful people that she knows, all of these wonderful connections that she knows. She's actually from Peru. She used to work for the university several years ago, or a few years ago. Now she lives in Texas, but she has her own business where she helps organize and lead service groups. So she usually organizes a Lima city tour. It's a guided tour where we're on a bus and you go to some of the different districts in Lima to try and get some history, get the lay of the land, learn a little bit about the city in which we're staying, it's really nice. Typically that first day we're pretty tired and groggy and jet lagged because it is a pretty long flight. That whole week we will be going to the school, La Alegría en el Señor. That's my poor Spanish, but anyways, it's an elementary school. It's a school. They have an elementary section, and then it'd be like our junior high school kind of a section. And so typically we'd wake up, the sisters would have breakfast for us. We'll eat breakfast, we'll walk about 1.5 blocks to the school. We'll help get students unloaded from their taxis and such, help get them into chairs, take them to their classrooms, those sorts of things. In the past, I've divvied up different student groups per classroom and just sort of focused on maybe a couple of the students in that classroom at a time. Working on some projects that you need to work on with them, those sorts of things. We walk back to the retreat house for lunch. The sisters have lunch for us. When we're done with lunch, we go finish up at the school, anything that we started maybe for the day, help get students lined up or set up for their transportation back home. And then we organize their chairs and stuff at the end of the day. So they're ready to go for the next day. So we do that for the whole week that we're there. In the evening, I like to, either right before dinner, after dinner, I like to sort of debrief how the day went, who's working on what, sort of problem solve anything that we need to problem solve as a group. Usually the evenings are fun or filled with maybe some fun games, some discussion, anything like that. There's been some times when some students have walked down to a grocery store just to take a look at the produce and some of those kinds of things. Saturday, she has down maybe an OT conference, and so it's not uncommon for her to line up some sort of a presentation or something like that for us to present, demonstrate. One year we did it for some of the administration staff at the school. One day we did it for parents. One time we just did it for a bunch of professionals at a local university. And so she's saying that, you know, we may have the opportunity to do that. And if we can't do that, then we might just have a free day. Free days, typically, if we have a free day, we're usually on our own for that day. We can work with the drivers that Kimberly knows, and we can decide maybe as a group what we want to do for that free day. In the past, we have done some bicycle tours. We have done, I think there was one group that did kayaking in the bay. It was a little bit chilly, but they had a blast. Just going to the beach, there's a bunch of different varieties of activities there. I think there was paragliding, all kinds of fun things, but typically, again, those things were on our own. I think one day we went to the mall. There was a mall nearby, and we just went there for the day. And so if we're gone for the whole day, we need to let the sisters know so they don't have to worry about our meals for that day. Wakachina, so that's included in our tour. Typically, it is a full day. We hop on a nice tour bus. We go across the country, countryside, not the whole country, I guess. But Wakachina is actually a town in the sand dunes, and so there's an oasis, so a nice little lake, if you will, surrounded by sand dunes. And so we will go there for the day. It's a fun day, full day of fun. Typically it's warmer there. Lots of sand. When we go there, sometimes we'll stop off in a little seaside town and take a little boat tour of the Paracas Islands. I'm not sure if she's able to swing that in the budget. She'll include it, and if not, then we skip it. But sometimes she also has some pisco and wine tasting. Also, pisco is their national alcoholic beverage there, so it's made from grapes. So that's typically is an all-day event. That's just a lot of fun. Some students have gone sandboarding. It's like a snowboard. You go on your belly and you go down the sand dunes. A lot of fun, pretty intense. Anyways, it can be a blast. That next week, then that Monday, the Hogar Clínica San Juan de Dios is a public hospital where people go, people who don't have private insurance. This is where they go for healthcare. It is quite an amazing facility that they have, or it's an amazing experience for us to see how another country's healthcare works. So it's nice to kind of get that tour. That next day, we would fly to Cusco, which is in the highlands of Peru. So we would take a domestic flight. Usually we have that day, that evening, to sort of get accustomed to the high altitude. Now, it's not uncommon for some students to feel lightheaded, maybe a little nauseous. And so Kimberly hands us off to a lady named Carmen, who always says no, and you never know if she actually means yes or no. Are you feeling good? No? Well, no, I feel awful. So do I say no or yes? I don't know. Anyways, sweetest lady ever. She runs a hotel up in Cusco, and she takes very good care of us. And she will say, you have chicken or alpaca and a rice and soup, and that's it. Like nothing, you know, like just very easy on the stomach. And they will have coca tea to try and help with the altitude sickness, those sorts of things. So then we just sort of become accustomed to Cusco. We get a good night's rest. That next day, we will get on a bus and we will go through the Sacred Valley. We will see some Incan ruins up there. The Incas are very agricultural. It is just so beautiful and so fascinating, the architecture and stuff that they have in some of those valleys. It's just unbelievable. There's some pictures coming up here. So then we're sort of used to the altitude by then. So then the next day we would hop on a train to a town called Aguas Caliente at the base of Machu Picchu. We would spend the night there. Early in the morning, we would get up, go to the base of Machu Picchu, take a tour, climb up the mountain, either Machu Picchu or Huayna Picchu, climb down, spend the day at Aguas Caliente, hop on a train that evening, go back to Cusco. Typically in the morning then, this is where students like to do their shopping in Cusco. It's typically cheaper there. And then after we've spent the morning there, we'll take an afternoon flight back to Lima. We'll hang out in the airport and then eventually fly back to the United States. So that's sort of the plan. In the past, we've typically had about 20 OT students who have gone. I would love to see at least 20 to 30, well, maybe that might be pushing it, but with all 3 sites, I would love to see that number. If that's the case, we would have another faculty come with. And so instead of your Lima City tour, we would have one group of OT students go to Cusco, do the Sacred Valley, Machu Picchu, and then come back to Lima to start their school experience. And so we'd have 2 different groups and we would just flip-flop and have some of you students go to Machu Picchu and Cusco, and then follow up with your school. And then those who went to the school the first week would then go to Machu Picchu that next week. Okay, I know that was a lot to take in, but just some of the trip summaries. So you can see here the Lima City tour. There's a picture in the left-hand side. The Huacachina Oasis. I'll try and move my picture here. There we go. So there's the lake in the middle of these sand dunes. It's really quite beautiful and fun. The Paracas Islands or Bellastis Islands boat tour. That's in the ocean. It's really neat because you can see some of the, I don't know if they're Nazca lines, but they have different designs into the side of the mountains or into the side of the hills. That's just incredible. Sometimes Kimberly will take us to like a show in the evening, and there's this fountain show. So again, just sort of taking the scenery, lots of group fun cultural experiences. Also, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, excuse me. So sometimes in the evening, Kimberly might take us to a dinner and dance show. And so this is where they do some of the traditional dances. Typically, there's a variety or like a buffet line of different Peruvian dishes that you can try. It's really an interactive sort of dancing session. It's really quite fun. So they'll pull people in from the crowd and it really is a blast. Some of the other pictures here are in Cusco with the Sacred Valley tour. And so you can see some of the people, they're actually, the 2 women are dyeing yarn made from alpaca for some of their traditional clothing and some of their blankets and those sorts of things. So I purchased a blanket from these two women, and it's so incredible. Again, I'm not doing this any justice here, but you know, these are in the highlands and it's a little bit cooler. You can see the Incas did a lot of terracing for their gardens, and this was all part of their irrigation and watering, and again, all related to agriculture. So really quite fascinating. On one of the tours in the ancient or sacred valley, there were these little pools, and this is where they have salt. And so they make their salt in some of these pools. So really quite cool and spectacular. Again, this is in Cusco, quite magnificent here. You see the students, the 3 students at the top. These are a couple of our billing students. This is where they went shopping in Cusco that morning before our afternoon flight. This is the right-hand side of that. This is, of course, we're looking at Machu Picchu, or looking down on the site itself, which is pretty cool. Words can't do this any justice. Yes, they do have llamas and they do have alpacas in the park. Really quite fascinating. And then the bottom picture is of Cusco, just of that city. And so you can see the traditional Inca flags there that are those rainbow flags. They're Inca inspired. So very cool. This is where we went to a particular hospital, again with related or with those with public health. Back. And so for this particular trip, we actually did an international presentation to nurses, doctors, therapy departments on how we do ergonomics and transfers. This particular hospital was the largest publicly funded hospital in Peru. And there's a lot of, it's like a big university hospital. And so a lot of students come here to study like tropical diseases, and they have different buildings for each type of disease. It really was remarkable and just a really neat opportunity to be able to present to these people. The retreat home is where we lived. It is, let's see here, it is in the subdivision called La Molina. It's gated, it's safe, it's locked every night. So the sisters run it. It's like a big, gosh, so in the center is where you meet for your breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then they have separate wings. And so one time when I was there, they had another group of people that were staying there, and they were down another wing, and the sisters would prepare their food. They would get them ready, cleaned out of there, and then it would be our turn to come down. And so it can be pretty busy. It actually is quite beautiful. There's beautiful plants and flowers, and it's just very calming. So all of us are down the same corridor. We each have our own room. It's like a little twin size bed with a little bathroom, a toilet, a shower in there. And so let's see here. The sisters did not speak any English, and typically a lot of our students don't speak Spanish. So we do a lot of Google Translate on our phones, those sorts of things. I think, let's see here, we just want to be very respectful of the sisters, their time, what they're doing for us, and be very respectful of their home. So I've had students who have asked, well, you know, because we have the opportunity to walk by a gas station that sells some of, like, you know, Peruvian food, coffee. There is some Peruvian beer there, wine, those kinds of things. And I've had students say, well, you know, can we just try some and sample it? And you know, I would hate for a sister to walk by our corridor, which they do, and see, you know, people doing that. I just kind of drinking and those kinds of things. I think that might be viewed as disrespectful. But I think, you know, it's also cultural to sort of try some of those things. So I think, you know, if we want to try some of those things, just to make sure that we're doing it behind closed doors and making sure that we're taking out all of our trash, again, just being very quiet and respectful in their home. This is a little bit about the school, La Alegría en el Señor. I actually found a YouTube video, and it's in Spanish, but I mean, you know, you could even put it on mute if you wanted to. Some of the children, this was a few years ago that this video was made, but I've actually worked with quite a few of these kids in the video. And so when I found this video, I started tearing up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I know these kids. And, you know, when I knew them, they were a little bit older than in this video too. And so please take a look at this video so you see the environment within the school and you see what some of those kids look like. The school is for children with primary and secondary school, and they all have some sort of disability, okay? It could be, there's a lot of musculoskeletal conditions, there's a lot of neurological conditions. I can go through a list of different diagnoses like CP, muscular dystrophy, arthrogryposis, just to name a few. It is Catholic and privately funded. 90% of the students are on private scholarships or scholarships because they come from very poor areas. In the morning, students typically gather for prayer, announcements, they go to their classrooms. What's really cool about this school is they do have a therapy gym on site. Typically, they have an OT. The last few years I've gone there, I think I've gone there 3 years, and 2 of the years they have been without an OT. OT is pretty new in their country. They do have a PT on site and they have a lot of PT aides. I would say the therapies these kids get are very biomechanical based. So sensory processing, not so much. Motor skills, not so much. It's very biomechanical. So a lot of what we actually do is, again, biomechanical. So is there any ergonomic changes we can make to their classroom setting to help them participate in their education? We did so much wheelchair modification, some simple desk height changes, pencil grips. We've made things out of splinting material to help with their wheelchairs, to help maybe with some functional splints, grips, those kinds of things. We are using anything and everything we can and thinking outside the box, and it's the creativity is just amazing. The students really feel like they learn to apply what they can get or what they can use in their environment, and to get and to think on their feet and become really creative with just some very common supplies. Again, we're working in the school, and so we want to be very respectful that the teachers run a very tight ship. They know these kids a lot more than we do, and we don't want to be a distraction to some of the other kids. I'm not going to go through these cultural stories. These are things that the students put in to this PowerPoint. Just review it on your own if you're interested. It really is quite touching. Some of the things that the students have walked away with. So for my research agenda as faculty, I have looked at the effects that international service learning has on students, particularly our OT students. And I've used lots of different outcome measures on increasing cultural awareness, increasing cultural competency, increasing cultural intelligence. And so clearly when you take somebody such as yourselves and you move them to a country like Peru and you are immersed in that culture, you sort of have a deeper understanding of, oh, well, even though we're different, we do have similarities, right? Like that smile is universal. We have to work through cultural differences. And this is myself too. Like I am not an expert. When I go down there, I am not an expert. I like to use my experience, but it's a lot of trial by fire and trial and error. And there have been times I've gone down there and I have made somebody upset because I didn't think of something cultural. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. And, you know, I apologize. And then, you know, all is good. I own up to it. And so when we're working on things or working with people on things, you know, there obviously is going to be a language barrier there. And, you know, a smile goes a long ways. It's nice to gain practice working through interpreters. That happens more often than not in practice is when we're working with somebody from a different language or who speaks a different language, and we actually use interpreters in practice. So that's a unique aspect that some students come back and say, hey, you know what? I didn't realize how common it would be using an interpreter. I've had a lot of students come back and say, you know, that time in Peru, I felt like I actually was doing hands-on OT for my level 1 field work. Whereas a lot of peers say, you know what, I kind of was standing in the corner just observing the therapist do her assessments and do her interventions, where in Peru, you're paired with another student and you are there, like you are the one implementing, you're the one doing it. Certainly I'm there for help, or another faculty is there for help, but we don't know the answers, right? Like we got a brick, we got an inner tube, and we got some Velcro. Like, what are we gonna do with it? I don't know. Like, let's try and problem solve that, right? And so students have come back saying that they really were pushed to problem solve and problem solve with limited resources. I always tell students that one of my working experiences in a skilled nursing facility is we had a big shop, and if we wanted to use any, or if we wanted to do anything, we had to go to the shop first and look and see what supplies were there. And it was just a huge jumbled mess. And I remember having a very similar experience when I was a student we didn't go to Peru at the time, we went to Guatemala. And I'm like, this is just like what I had to do in Guatemala. I did not realize how similar this experience would be. And so again, being able to make something out of nothing or use what you have first is a skill that you can walk away with this from. We start the OT process from start to finish here. So sometimes on a traditional level 1 fieldwork, I've had level 1 fieldwork students, and at that time they come to me for the week, we don't have any new evaluations. So they don't get to see an OT evaluation, or they don't get to see a discharge, right? They just get to see our interventions, right? And they don't get to see the whole OT process. And so in this experience, we do an OT assessment. It might be informal and usually through observation and interviews with the teachers and such. And then after that, we implement some interventions, and then we wrap up with those interventions, make recommendations, and then we move on. So students have come back saying that this experience in Peru really helped them with their communication skills. just using their therapeutic use of self, thinking outside the box, having to really explain what they're doing and why they're doing it, because they have to explain that in layman's terms for interpreters so it can be interpreted. So they really found that helpful for their future fieldwork and their future jobs. I could talk more and more and more about that, but I know I want to show you more pictures. So this is the question I have a lot, right? So what's the tentative budget? And so again, this is tentative. It's going to be very dependent on how many students get to go. The more students we get, some of the fees and such will go down, so the cheaper it could be. However, if we reach a certain point of students, then we need another faculty. And then we have to look at group travel rates and those sorts of things. So we can't just say it's going to be X amount of dollars, right? We have a budget and we have some estimates, and we sort of work these out throughout our time up until our trip. Now, when I explain that, right, if I say, okay, in the past few years we've gone, typically it's roughly $4,000, okay? And I know it's kind of like a $4,000, oh my gosh, okay, hear me out. All right. So airfare to Houston, Kemmerly says, let's have students do that on their own. So if we're flying out of Billings, if we're flying out of Fargo, if we're flying out of Bismarck, or wherever, right? If we can have, a lot of times students have frequent flyer miles, right? And so they can get that trip to Houston for cheaper, right? Or maybe they don't have to pay for it. Okay, and so she's saying, we can be flexible if students want to get to Houston on their own, okay? Again, that can help save some cost. Airfare from Houston to Lima is roughly $1,200, okay? Recently, that has gone down quite a bit. And so, like, gosh, if we could have booked that last month, flying out of Bismarck to Lima was about half that amount just from Houston to Lima. So we're budgeting for the extreme and hoping that it's not this much, okay? Like I said, airfare out of Bismarck, Billings, and Fargo was actually cheaper flying out of those cities than it was flying out of Houston. That usually never happens, but those are things Kemmerly keeps an eye on, and those are things that Kemmerly is going to work with us to get you guys a better deal, okay? So the big kicker that I want everybody to understand is we have to look at the group as a whole, all right? What I do not want to happen, well, what I want to happen, okay? What I want to happen is everybody gets to Lima in roughly the same time, okay? So we have to make sure all of you students, everybody gets to Houston at the same time, and we can all board and get to Lima at the same time. Kemmerly is arranging for us to have transportation at Lima, okay? So I don't want like 12 of us to get into Lima at midnight, and then, now this student took another airline and now they're delayed 2 hours, and so they're coming in now at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's not enough time for our driver to take us to the retreat house and come back. And so we end up all sitting there for hours, okay? So we have to make sure that we're looking at the group as a whole and we're all arriving to Lima at the same time, which means that we have to leave Houston at the same time. So if you're on your own for airfare getting to Houston, okay, you have to make sure that you don't book your Houston trip until the whole group has booked theirs. Okay, let me repeat that. You have to wait, if you are booking your own airfare to Houston, you have to wait until the whole group has their airfare from Houston to Lima. That way you know what time you absolutely have to be in Houston to get to Lima with the group, okay? Ugh, I hope everybody heard that and took notes on that. So our transportation to the retreat house, room and board for that whole week, I'm talking breakfast, lunch, dinner, spending the night, the city tour, the Wakachina day trip, per student, that's $1,070. That's pretty reasonable for a whole week, okay? Students do incur a fee to take faculty with them to be their level 1 fieldwork educator supervisors, but typically that's divided up among all students. And so if 8 students go, that's roughly an extra $350 to pay for your faculty transportation there. I know myself, when I go, I like to try and pitch in with some of the fundraisers and stuff like that to try and bring my costs down. Now, if we get 20 some students and we need another faculty member, again, it's kind of a wash, because again, it still would roughly be about $350 per student just to cover 2 faculty. So we will look at that. Right now, there's discussion about students having international travel insurance. This is an absolute need. Typically, it's about $50. In the past, Kimberly has always purchased this for us. The university right now is saying, well, I think we want to look at it on our own. However, it's roughly $50 to cover us. I've had insurance there. I ended up with a really bad sinus infection. They do have a lot of dust and smog in the air. And I started having really bad bloody noses and stuff, which isn't like me. So I went to Kimberly helped me go to a private company, a private clinic. And they did like x-rays of my face, and they're like, yep, you got a sinus infection. They spoke English. They gave me an antibiotic that I would get here. They gave me some other stuff here. I had to pay up front. I put it on a credit card. When I got back to the States, Kimberly helped me fill out my insurance form. I was reimbursed 100%. So I know we had a faculty twist her ankle and ended up needing a walking boot and x-rays. Same thing, that was paid for 100%. We had one student that ended up with a really bad stomach bug. That was a very extreme case. She did go to a hospital. It was a private hospital. And again, that was all paid for. I can talk more about that when we meet in person, because I was there with her on the trip. Cusco, and I spelt Machu Picchu wrong. Cusco and Machu Picchu trip, transportation. So we do have to take a bus, or we take a plane from Lima to Cusco. We take a bus from Cusco somewhere else to the train station. We go on a train and we end up in this town. And then from the town, the next morning we get on a bus to go to Machu Picchu. So that whole trip, including overnight hotel in Aguas Caliente, the domestic airfare to and from Lima and Cusco, the park fees, all of that transportation is $800 for everyone. So this is something where it's extra. And so, you know, it's something that I would pay for myself to go, and you know, like, that's not going to be included for any student fees. Kimberly does have fees because she has her own business called EDU Travel. She arranges interpreters, she lines up home visits, transportation. She's our liaison and our on the ground running. Divided up again, if 8 students go, using her services to organize everything, which is absolutely necessary, it's roughly like a $500 fee, okay? So again, looking at what our tentative budget could be, you know, it's looking like maybe $4,000. Again, we'd be responsible to get to Houston, but we don't schedule Houston until the group has their trip and we know when we're leaving Houston, okay? Because you do not want to be in Lima ahead of the group, and you do not want to be in Lima after the group. If we do have any free days and you guys want to do like paragliding, kayaking, a bike tour, any of those kinds of things, those free days are on our own. Typically, those are pretty reasonable. I think the paragliding was it. I don't even want to say how much it was, but it was, you know, I would do it again. It was reasonable. Now, students are like, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. And oh, yes, 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 it is. It is. It is. But okay, let's consider if you are going to Florida or Alaska or California or somewhere else for your level 1 fieldwork. Okay. So airfare to fly out of Bismarck, I know it's $600 to $800, right? If you're going to go to any of those places, and that's being pretty reasonable. We do have some students that go to fieldwork in Hawaii, and their airfare is quite a bit more than $800 flying out of here. If we were to stay in a hotel for 7 days, right, and we're talking about maybe $200 a night. Now I know students can find a lot cheaper hotel than that, but let's just say $200 a night for 7 days, you're looking at easily $1,400, okay? 3 meals a day for 7 days, what? $10 for breakfast, $20 for lunch, $30 for dinner, I may have overdone $50 per day, but $350 for meals. If you do have to fly, you might have to get a car rental, you'll have to pay for gas, you'll probably want travel insurance. If you are going anywhere on level 1 field work, you probably will want to do some sightseeing anyway, and some touristy things while you're there. You're looking at you know, $3,400 compared to like 4,000, right? So is there a difference going to Peru and, you know, seeing one of the 7 wonders of the world with Machu Picchu, getting a very unique hands-on level 1 field work, guaranteed for that? Yes, it's a little bit more expensive. Now, when I compare this, I don't want anybody to be offended or anybody to freak out, right? So clearly, if Peru is not in your budget, I totally get that, right? This isn't to say that, you know, you're going to have to pay $800 for airfare for your field work, or, you know, so when I came up with this tentative budget, right, I'm like, okay, if I had to justify to my parents why I want to go to Peru, this is what I would tell them, right? Well, mom and dad, you know, if I went to, you know, somewhere else, flying out of Bismarck, you know, this is my spiel. Like, so, okay, mom and dad, see, there's only, you know, $600 difference, and I could go to Peru and I could see this and I could experience that, and really it's only this much difference. You know, that's the pitch that I would give my own parents to justify Peru, okay? Now, when I was a student on level 1 fieldwork, I stayed with family, right? I drove, I didn't eat 3 meals a day. I had groceries, I made sandwiches, I didn't need a car rental. And so I was able to get by on a level 1 fieldwork a whole heck of a lot cheaper. But again, if I were to put this off on my parents to help me out with some funds and those kinds of things, I'd say, come on, help me out here, okay? So I hope that's clear. That was more than I wanted to spend on that. So those of you who are still with me and are interested, the first thing you need to do is check your passport, okay? I looked at mine and I'm like, oh my goodness, mine's expiring. And so some countries require that you have to have a valid passport for so many months even after your travel. I don't know what Peru is, okay? But I think I was set to get back. So if we get back in Peru, end of June, beginning of July, somewhere in there, right? I think my passport expired in August of that same year. It's not worth it to me, right? So I sent mine in for a renewal. They're saying that routine service is 14 weeks out. So if you need a passport, it's going to take you a minimum of 14 weeks. That's now. That means get on it now. They do have an expedited service where, of course, you pay more money. So for me to renew my passport, it was $110. and I had to go get my passport picture taken, which I went to CVS Pharmacy, and they had, you get 2 pictures, and it's guaranteed to work for the passport formatting. And so it was $14.99, and I got it within just a couple minutes. So that was worth it to me. Okay, so again, check your passport. Here's the link to look at all the passport stuff. What's also unique about this Peru fieldwork experience, you guys, is we can fundraise for it, okay? I don't think students do this enough. And so think about, we go back to the previous slide, right? $3,400 for a level 1 fieldwork, potentially. Again, that's like me trying to justify the trip to my parents, right? To help, like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna experience Peru. It's only $600 more than like another fieldwork, okay? Here's the thing, okay? With Peru, you can fundraise, and those fundraising, the fundraising that you do will bring your costs down clearly, right? You can't fundraise for any other fieldwork, okay? So Peru, we can fundraise for. Your other fieldworks, you can't fundraise for. And so our sky is the limit for fundraising, you guys. And it's some of the things that I would highly recommend all 3 sites do is to sell OT apparel. Faculty have been asking for this for a while. This used to be a year 2 OT student fundraiser across all 3 campuses. We work with a local agency that has nice quality clothing, and we have University of Mary OT, Doctorate of OT on there. We have, this is apparel. It's not just a t-shirt, right? It's apparel that you could wear on level 2 fieldwork. You can represent the University of Mary. It has University of Mary logo on it, okay? It's something that you could wear in your future practice. That way, perhaps practitioners in the community could purchase from you. All of our OT students could purchase from you. All of our faculty could purchase from you. And typically we walk away, or those students walked away with a pretty good funds. Year 2 OT students used to do it for their banquet, graduation banquet. We're not doing that anymore. And so we have been asked for Peru OT to take this on as a fundraiser to help us with our trip. There's lots of service-oriented fundraisers out there where we're doing some kind of a service. So here in Bismarck, there's a company in town, it's a gas station. We have, support OT going to Peru. And we fill people's gas tanks, and it's we pump their gas for them, and they'll give us a tip and stuff like that. So it's 100% profit. Pizza Ranch, I don't know if other sites know what Pizza Ranch is. It's a pizza place, it's a buffet place. It's tricky to get signed up for it, but when you sign up for it, you can put out tip jars. Typically it's just bussing tables, wiping tables off, those kinds of things. And you get a certain commission at the end of the night for the overall sales. So I have seen people make well over $1,000 at Pizza Ranch. Again, that goes towards whoever does that service that day. Certain sales. So I don't know if anybody from Distant Sites knows what Schwann's is. It's a big yellow truck. They go around and they sell different frozen foods, those kinds of things. You can sign up for Schwann's fundraisers. Give family, friends codes, right? When they order from Schwann's, a certain percentage goes to those proceeds. Applebee's does Dine to Donate. I think Space Aliens also does that. I typically haven't seen students make a lot of money. You make a flyer, you make sure people bring the flyer with you to the restaurant so the server can put in the coupon code. And then we get like a certain percentage of profits from those who submitted that code. I've had a lot of students sell Yankee candles, and that surprisingly has been a really big fundraiser. I think one of my kids, they sold Avon fundraiser, like there are so many options out there. And another thing that our Student OT Association has done that has been a really good moneymaker is selling butter braids. And so Billings, you guys probably don't know what that is. Fargo, maybe you do. It's a frozen pastry that you go out, you sell, you collect money from people, you put in your bulk order with the company. I think they're out of, is it Sanborn, North Dakota, somewhere between here and Fargo. And then we pick up the bulk order, give them to those people who ordered, and then you would deliver those butter braids. Typically, we've made anywhere from $700 as a student organization to like $1,500 worth of sales with those. So a pretty good fundraiser. Again, Billings, I don't expect you to jump on board with that. I don't think we could get them to you, but you probably have something very similar out there. Our most popular donations that students do is they ask their family, right, or friends, hey guys, instead of a Christmas present this year, instead of a new laptop computer, or like, can you put money towards my Peru trip, right? So that's the most popular thing. Instead of a birthday present this year, can you give me some money so I can pay for airfare, right? I have had some students who have been very active in their churches at home, in their hometowns, present to their local church, and their local church has paid for their whole trip. Pretty unbelievable. The stipulation was they come back and they present to their church parish on what they did, okay? And so we've also sent letters to certain organizations in our town and our community that have been supportive of our OT program and asked for donations that way. And we have gotten some sponsorship that way in the past. What ends up happening, so students always say, well, you know, how does the fundraising work? So typically what happens is we'll make an Excel spreadsheet. And so say 5 of you students go and you pump gas, right? So you figure out of those 5 students how much you each brought in, and we keep track of it that way. Typically, the checks that are cut by these organizations have to be written out to You Marry Peru, something along those lines. So then it gets deposited in our global studies, which is kind of non-existent at this point, but we'll worry about that when it gets here. That way, if you have a family member who's saying, hey, you know what, I'm gonna give you $1,000 to put towards your Peru trip, right? That goes only to you. If 10 of you guys sell Yankee candles and the rest of you don't, those funds will go into each of your accounts. You know, however you wanna do that, that sort of needs to be a discussion you guys have up front and how you divvy that out. Right now, there's talk about having an application fee sometime due in November. Okay, roughly about $250. This helps separate those of us who are really interested in going and those who are like, oh, I don't really know. Because by the time we get those more accurate numbers, the more accurate our budget's going to be, right? So again, usually we'll have some kind of deposit due in November with an application. Typically then we have a payment schedule. So it's not, you know, so much money up front. Typically there's a payment in December, a payment in January, February, March, and April. The university requires that we schedule regular meetings. Now, it's kind of tricky. I don't have billing students. I have Fargo, excuse me, Fargo and Bismarck. And so I saw on our schedules that Mondays at 3 p.m., both Central Time and Mountain Time, are right after a class. I'm suggesting maybe we start meeting once a month, maybe in November. Once we get that application process approved, maybe in December we'll meet, or January we'll meet. When we start getting closer, we'll probably want to meet more often. We'll probably meet weekly when we start our summer term in May, all right? So I'm also suggesting, so I have a Google sign-up sheet. I'm the best with Google Docs. I'm hoping you guys can have access to it. Anybody who's remotely interested, I want you to sign up. So instead of bombarding the entire classes all the time, for those of you who are just interested in Peru, it will allow me an opportunity just to email those of you who are interested. So COVID and travel, right? This is another big question. Right now, there has been international travel as of September or October, may have even been October. Peru has opened up the international gates. And so here is sort of a website that's sort of ongoing and being constantly updated. Certainly, Kimberly keeps an eye on this. I keep an eye on it. You all can keep an eye on it. And another question I have is, what happens if we don't go? So what happens if we start depositing all this money in our account and we don't go? Heartbreaking, I know. It happened a couple years ago with the start of the epidemic. What happened for those students was they received all of their money back. And so if you remember COVID, can't remember when it hit, was it February, March? I think that's roughly when the university shut down their international travel. And I don't know if that was us or just the US in general. But the university, it took them about a month or two to get things figured out. And then they issued the students a refund. So at that time, Machu Picchu trip was in there, and that's an additional $800, you'll remember. A lot of those trips, right, when you put money down for Machu Picchu, it's, you know, there's a certain fee, or like if you cancel within so much, you don't get your money back, right? And so that happened. And Kimberly fought for our students, and she ended up getting them a 100% refund for their domestic flight within Peru, and all of their park fees, all of that stuff was all reimbursed. I think students, so even the money that was fundraised, so the students were told any money that was fundraised, the university can't give you that money back if it were given by a business, right? So if you tell a business, hey, I'm going to ask you for money to send me to Peru, right? And they give you money, and then you don't go to Peru, you know, it's unethical for you then to pocket that money and not use it for Peru, right? And so that's what the university was saying. But what ended up happening was the students ended up getting those fees that they fundraised. So they did the gas station, they did Schwanstein to donate, they had family and friends donate. They did end up getting that money back to them. When I look at the Excel spreadsheet, it looks like the university withheld like a $30 application fee. And I think that's why the university allowed them to get some of that fundraising money back. But what would happen, okay, so what would happen if you had a family member that donated specifically to you, or a friend that donated specifically to you, and you weren't able to go to Peru? You would get that money back, or that money would be returned back to your family or friend, okay? If you guys did like a gas station fundraiser where you're pumping gas, right? Or Applebee's dying to donate, send OT students to Peru, and you don't get to go. The university is saying they will hold those funds until a student group, a student OT group, can use those funds to go in the future. So I know it's kind of a double-edged sword. Students don't like to hear that. If they're doing a service, right, to go to Peru, they don't get to go. I think it's helpful knowing that your funds that you raised can be used for something for Peru. If you don't want it to be flagged for future travel to Peru, maybe I can have you guys write something in writing if this happens, that everybody wants those funds to go towards supplies to go to Peru in the future, or something along those lines. We'll have to work with the university on that, but that's what's been discussed so far. Okay. So what happens if we don't go? Any funds will either be returned to you, or they will be held in an account and used for future Peru travel or for future Peru service, if that's what those businesses gave money for. Okay, I hope that helps clear things up with that, and hopefully helps put things at ease. So packing list. I get this a lot. What do we need to do for packing? Okay, so June is actually winter time in Peru. Now, it's not North Dakota or Montana or Minnesota winters, okay? I would say it's sort of, the highs might be 70 degrees, the lows might be 50 degrees, but it's kind of damp. It's like misty, kind of damp, those kinds of things. And when we go into the highlands, there's this dampness in the air that makes it feel cooler. Plus the air is much more crisp. It's fresh. So typically though, students are like, oh my gosh, I feel a lot colder here. And so you'll see in some of the pictures, some people are wearing stocking caps and little gloves and those sorts of things. I have been there though, like in Lima, I have been there where it's been sunny and it's been 75 and beautiful. And I've gotten a little sunburned. So what typically happens though is in the morning it's chilly. And so it's nice to have like, layers. So it wouldn't be uncommon for students to wear like a long sleeve shirt underneath a scrub top. Scrubs have been what students have worn the last few years going there. It helps us look professional. Sometimes we can ask for donations from some scrub shops, or get a discount on some scrubs. And so they're typically very lightweight. They're easy to pack. You can usually wear them a couple times at the school, but sometimes they'll wear like a undershirt with a scrub top over the top, maybe a cardigan or something like that over the top. By the time afternoon rolls around, the cardigan is off. Maybe the undershirt is off and around the waist or something like that. So then you're just in your scrub top. Over time, I've noticed that lightweight fleece dries a lot quicker than like 100% cotton hoodie, right? So I love cotton hoodies. I just love them. But those Under Armour or off-brand Under Armour, that's more fleece rather than cotton. Typically you can shake those out and they actually dry, where cotton actually absorbs some of that humidity and moisture and stays damp and heavy. Okay. Something to keep in mind and something to keep an eye on is typically for international flights out of the US, typically students or people can bring 2 suitcases. What we usually end up doing is we pack 1 suitcase for ourselves, and we pack maybe another suitcase or another bag that can easily be folded up and inserted into our 1 suitcase, and we bring supplies with us. Okay, now it's kind of an issue that we have when we have that domestic flight in Peru and we go from Peru to Cusco. We're usually there for we're in Cusco for a couple nights, and then we take a little overnight bag so we can go to Machu Picchu, spend the night with our little overnight bag, come back to Cusco. So we can only have one suitcase when we travel domestically within Peru, okay? Something to keep in mind too is usually with international flights and domestic flights, they do have pound restrictions. When I looked online, I believe it's less than 50 pounds for international flights. I'm not sure the domestic Peru flight will use. Last time I went, it was 40 pounds, and there was like, oh my gosh, we need to kind of finagle and move some stuff around. So again, something we'll have to keep in mind. And like I mentioned, usually we save one of our suitcases to bring down supplies. We'll usually have a supply drive. You saw in a previous slide, we might have pool noodles, we might have foam, Velcro, straps, tools. In Peru, we do have a toolbox there that we've been kind of adding to. It's supposed to be there. Of course, I haven't been there for a few years. Walmart and Targets, you guys, you give them a call, you ask to speak to their manager, you say what we're doing. Every year they have given us something, whether it's a $50 gift card for supplies or a $100 gift card for supplies. I think one year the Walmart manager said, you write down everything you want with the item numbers, and we'll see what we can do. We gave them the item numbers. They gave us everything we wanted on our item list. It's like, oh my gosh, if we would have known that, we would have requested more. So those are good. Some of our local rehab stores, right? I think Great Plains Rehab here in Bismarck. I called up that guy before, and he's like, hey, we have a whole storage unit of things that we can't sell anymore or things that have been returned to us. Come take a look and see what you want. Billings, there's been a wheelchair store there that has donated wheelchairs. That gets a little tricky with customs. However, Dr. Kitzenberg out there and Kemmerly, we've all done that before. And so, you know, I mean, most of the kids are in wheelchairs. And so when we can bring them a really nice wheelchair, it's sort of a really cool thing. We want to make sure we're not bringing garbage down there or trash, right? Or things that are broken. They have enough broken stuff the way it is. And so I know some students have brought used wheelchairs down there before. And they were sort of like the stroller wheelchairs with the sway bottoms. And I went there a couple of years later and they were like shoved in a corner, all crumpled up, and like clearly they weren't being used, and they were just taking up their space. So we want to make sure what we bring down is sustainable for them to use. And again, the sky is the limit here as well. Bennett Hand Splints is a company I contact every year. And isn't that funny? I have my box of neoprene hand splints, just ones that they have extra lying around. I bring these down. We always find uses for them. It's a lot. They're a lot more forgiving than like a hard splint. People can use them, put them on. They can clean them a little bit better, and they're a little bit more forgiving as far as pressure issues and those kinds of things. So really, really cool. And I have those ready to go already. I believe that's all I have thought of on what to present. I know I'm long-winded. I hope you guys are still watching this. If you are interested in any way, I'm talking like 50-50 chance. I know the finances are a lot. Again, the more you fundraise, the more that cost is going to come down. The more students we get, that cost might come down. If we can get a really good deal on airfare, that cost can come down. And so I think this is the maximum amount that it would be. And so just kind of keep that in mind. Let's get the fundraising ball rolling, you guys. I would love to see a fundraiser before the end of the semester. Our butter braids, they are really good sellers right before Christmas. And so typically our student organization does that, and they didn't do that this year. They did Papa's pumpkin patch instead because we didn't have the okay to do Peru. And so now that we do, maybe we should flip flop and do the butter braids for sellers. However, if the interest isn't there, I'm not going to push it anymore. This has to come from students. And again, it's for your trip. If you have any questions whatsoever, please email me. Google Docs, this is the Google Doc. I'm suggesting you guys sign up, use your email address so that I can try and send out and push out emails. I should have a deadline on there, shouldn't I? Probably when I find out more about when they're going to want, the university is going to want your application and deposit. I know it's sometime in November, so I'll probably hopefully have an idea before then. Anyways, questions, email me. I'm super excited. I hope you're still with me. I hope we can get a good 20 students to go, 25 students. That would be great. Even if we have more, the more the merrier. It's a really great experience. I can't emphasize that enough. It really is life-changing. So anyways, thank you for your time and your attention.